I really like the Kaioken as a power-up. In fact, it may very well be my favorite. It's a technique that briefly amplifies power, speed, etc. to tremendous degrees, and can be multiplied to higher and higher levels for even greater effect. But it has a downside. It can really only be used in short bursts because it puts a great strain on the body, and the higher the level used, the greater tax on the body. So it can't just be used all the time to overpower an opponent. It has to be used strategically. That's why Goku only uses it against Nappa when he's too far away otherwise to stop him from attacking Gohan and Kuririn. But when he goes up against Vegeta, he has to use the Kaioken just to keep up, culminating in a ×4 Kaioken to win in the beam struggle. But in averting that crisis, his body is wrecked. Yajirobe can't even give Goku a congratulatory pat on the back without it causing him pain. Even his appearance looks dangerous. It causes Goku to really bulk up and surrounds him with a glowing red aura. When he powers up to a Kaioken ×3, it's almost as if he's a spring-loaded wind-up toy that launches itself at Vegeta involuntarily. It's so powerful it causes Bluma's Scouter to explode. It's a power that's necessary to win the day, but ultimately at a huge cost. But pay attention to when Gohan is transforming. Vegeta initially panics, but then realizes he should focus on removing the tail. He grabs Gohan's tail and tries to rip it off, but Gohan just smacks him away. Let me repeat that. He grabs Gohan's tail, but Gohan smacks him away. Forget 15-year-old Goku being some kind of fluke of a prodigy. If even a 5-year-old can have his untrained tail grabbed without it sapping his strength, Raditz must be the most pathetic Saiyan ever. With Vegeta finally broken, he summons his spaceship to take him away. But Kuririn, showing quite a bit of pragmatism, picks up Yajirobe's katana and prepares to finish Vegeta off before he can escape. But just then, Goku contacts Kuririn telepathically, because he can just do that now. Sorry, that kind of stuff bugs me. I certainly don't mind characters having telepathic powers, but when they just randomly pick them up? Whatever. Before I even start on the plot, I have to make an inevitable, prolonged detour into minutiae. This story can't happen! Let us briefly recap what brings us here. After a struggle to collect all 7 Dragon Balls, culminating in Oolong receiving panties, Bluma explains that after being used, the Dragon Balls become untraceable stones for a year. The next day, Goku leaves the group and by nightfall has begun his 8-month training with the Muten Roshi, concluding with the 2 of them and Kuririn competing in the Tenkaichi Budokai. Immediately after its conclusion, Goku picks up the Dragon Ball quest again. 8 months is the only time we know to have passed. 8 months is not a year. It's not even terribly close. 1. Say that Goku doesn't know when his birthday is, the narration forgot to account for at least 4 months of time, and the guidebooks are wrong, so that a year has indeed passed since Oolong got his panties. Or 2. Only 8 months have passed, Goku is still 12, but Earth's own god is too stupid to know how long a year is. Take your pick. Or you can take a third option, my personal favorite. It's a big old plot hole. Moving on. Many people say that Dragon Ball is loosely based on Journey to the West, and while that's not wrong, it's not entirely right either. The connection only exists in the first story arc, which takes up around 1/25 of the entire series. That's kind of like watching the episode of The Brady Bunch where the family puts on a production of Snow White and saying the Brady Bunch is based on Snow White. Obviously this is a little different, since Journey to the West forms the foundation of the story of Dragon Ball, but even in this first arc the connection is quite loose. The main characters somewhat correspond to the travelers from that story, and both sets are traveling westward. A few more story elements are referenced, but my point is that I won't be dwelling too heavily on its background. Even if it did borrow more strongly from what is supposed to be its source, it matters more that Dragon Ball holds up on its own rather than as a comparison to anything else. If Journey to the West had one lasting impact on Dragon Ball, it was certainly in the character of Son Goku, who was based off the character Son Wukong. In fact, they have the same name. Goku's name is the Japanese reading of it. Their personalities and backstories aren't very similar, but the monkey tail, his expanding Nyoibo, and, as we'll see later, his flying cloud Kinton are all based on his Chinese namesake. And of course, it all culminates in Goku stripping off her underwear and discovering, to his horror, that she seems to be missing a few key components of anatomy. But Bulma just thinks he's having a dream that their Dragon Balls have been stolen. This sets up Goku's shtick for this and the next arc, where he can only definitively tell a person's biological sex if he pats them on the crotch. What has always tugged at my mind about this scene, though, is what it could imply about Goku's relationship with his grandfather. Okay, so he liked to rest his head on his grandfather's lap. I guess that's not a big deal. Nor is the idea that he would recognize that Bulma's lap feels different and thus uncomfortable. But considering that Goku refers to it as basically a fluffy testicle pillow, well, let me just say that I hope it was a term the naive child came up with on his own rather than something his grandfather taught him to use. So despite the fact that he's not healed, Yamcha decides he has to do something. Yamcha's plot here is one of those things that both impresses me and makes me extremely embarrassed for him. I mean, on one hand, he's leading a charge into battle against impossible odds with a freaking broken leg and next to no resources, and he's not even blinking. But on the other hand, I mean, just look at this for a second. He's just thrown a bunch of guns into the hands of two people who can't even fight. This ain't exactly Patton here. I really doubt any of the readers were going, "Oh my gosh, I hope Yamcha, Bulma, and Lunch get there soon. They're really gonna turn the tide of this battle." Seeing him cowering behind the remains of a building holding some nunchucks isn't exactly awe-inspiring either. They only manage to comically arrive right after the battle is over. Again. Yep, yet another plot element that's just like something from the Red Ribbon Army arc, only not done as well. And then, as if the whole thing wasn't pathetic enough, as soon as they get underway, Lunch sneezes back into her ditzy form and wonders why they're going on a picnic. So while I really want to give Yamcha credit for being proactive and doing the best he can when he literally has nothing to work with, he really needs to come up with another strategy besides piling everybody into his Winnebago. It might have worked for Fred, it doesn't work for you. Poor dolt. Upon reminding Goku that he told him to train his tail, Goku figures out who he is. "And I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids." Goku tearfully and affectionately greets Gohan, giving the old man a fluffy testicle pillow of his own. As for me, I find quite a lot to enjoy here on every single level. Aside from Sergeant Metallic, every fight is interesting and unique, be it Murasaki's antics, Blue's telekinesis, Tao Pai Pai's Dodon Pa, and Gohan's tail grabbing, not to mention the other crazy Udanai Baba fighters. The story and the art go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned because there's just so much to look at. Goku goes everywhere. There's a snow world, there's feudal Japan, there's the crazy lollipop architecture in the city, there's a pirate cave with wacky traps, a giant mystical tower, an army compound. It provides such a variety to the adventures, and they all look so beautiful. There's a particular shot of Goku approaching Karning that I never stopped to notice before. I realized the background was just so rich and detailed, and there are so many panels like that. And it's just so sad when you think about how infamous Dragon Ball is for its constant use of repetitive, barren wastelands, as opposed to the rich topography that Toriyama is clearly able to depict. I like that the story keeps giving obstacles to Goku, but I don't like that it relies on the Dragon Radar not working 3 times. That's a bit too much, although it does help set up the subversion the final time when it's revealed that the Dragon Radar isn't actually broken. It's worth noting that Red is the only head bad guy in the series that Goku does not get to face. I like that. Now, the way this Tao Pai Pai thing is set up is interesting. In fact, it's very reminiscent of Jackie Chun in a way. First, he took out Chaozu, now he's set up against Ten Shinhan, and if he beats him, his next opponent will be Goku. Audiences must have been on the edges of their seats wondering how far this revenge plan would go, if it would tie into the Piccolo storyline. Or at least they would be if Goku didn't absolutely sap all the tension out of it by repeatedly telling everyone not to worry because Tenshinhan has this in the bag. And he does. He beats him easily and hands him over to Sudu Sennin so they can fly off with their tails tucked between their legs, never to be seen again. Well, that was pointless. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see Tenshinhan kick butt. It's the next to last time we actually get to see him defeat an opponent, which is especially satisfying given how poor showing he made in the last arc. But, Tenshinhan receives a scar here that he carries for the rest of the series. That's a bold statement. That should mean something. It easily could have meant something. Kame Sennin remarks that her style was similar to his own school's, which is funny considering he once famously told his students his school doesn't have moves. And Ma Jr., Piccolo's alias, comments that the move Goku uses to knock the girl out of bounds is similar to a Mazoku move. Funny, I've never seen any Mazoku do that. I've seen Jackie Chun do it. Speaking of sacrificial lambs, though, the poster child of that, Yamcha, has his fight against the unlikely Shen. Maybe Yamcha lucked out this time. Maybe he'll get to take on Ma Jr. in the semifinals. No, of course not. Desperate to actually win a quarterfinal, Yamcha pulls out his trump card, the Sokidan, or Spinning Key Bullet, a completely controllable energy ball that seemingly misses, only to come out from under the ring to clock Shen good. But at this, Shen decides that's enough playing around and knocks the still celebrating Yamcha out of the ring. By this point, Yamcha has long since lost any credibility in the measuring stick role. See, Yamcha suffers from the Worf effect. Worf was a security officer in Star Trek The Next Generation, so he'd often be one of the first people to encounter a new alien threat. Worf is also a Klingon, a bloodthirsty warrior race. So it was common for Worf to get his butt kicked to show how powerful the episode's threat was. Similarly, Yamcha was one of the strongest fighters in the first arc, so he was sacrificed to Jackie Chun to show how tough the mysterious old man was, and then next time to Tenshinhan for the same purpose. The problem, though, is that if you employ that trope enough without letting the Worf have victories, he's no longer the tough guy who gets beaten up a lot. He's just the guy who gets beaten up a lot. As for the deaths of the characters themselves, I think they're all handled very well. More than anything, the deaths contribute to the building of tension, and the emotions expressed by the survivors give the deaths weight. Let's start with Yamcha. Now, here is the image that has launched 1,000 internet memes. Perhaps more than anything else, Yamcha lying dead in a crater is what he is remembered for. Poor dolt. They're t-shirts, action figures. Well, as much as you can call the plastic representation of a dead person an action figure. To his detractors, it is everything lame about Yamcha expressed in one eye-rolling moment. His lack of ability and his arrogance result in an embarrassing death, while he's talking trash no less, against not even the main villains, but one of their minions. And I can understand that. It's not exactly the most impressive moment for a guy who is starving for more impressive moments. And from that perspective, it does annoy me that Toriyama once again did the predictable with Yamcha by using him as the victim to show the situation is serious, and for resurrecting this arrogant streak of Yamcha's that only shows up right before something bad is going to happen to him. However, when I first saw it, I had to take it just on its own merits, and from that perspective, I found it and still find it to be a powerful, dramatic moment. While Yamcha does get cocky at the end, belittling the Saibai men to the Saiyans and volunteering to take out all four by himself, as I said, that is in keeping with the general tone of the battle up until now. After all, a Saiyan of around the same strength of the Saibai men is what defeated Son Goku himself, and yet they're doing okay so far. And while he does go out in a rather undignified way, I've always thought the fight leading to it, while short, is fairly impressive. I mean, just the fact that it is so short is impressive in and of itself. He handily puts his Saibai man away. And Toriyama does, through Gohan, demonstrate that it is an exceptionally fast fight that requires ki sensing to even follow. And while it's not quite the noble and heroic sacrifice that Chaozu and Tenshinhan get, he is still fighting for others. Kuririn starts to volunteer and Yamcha shoots him down, reminding Kuririn he's already been brought back to life by the Dragon Balls and can't do it again. If anything, it's the most cautious statement anyone has made so far, a reminder not to take chances. If only he'd remembered that. Having achieved that, Piccolo hits Goku with a massive blast, and that seems to be the end of it. Goku's heart has stopped beating. Piccolo takes the Dragon Ball and goes about his merry way. Now, this is one of those Red Ribbon repeats I mentioned in part 1, and this one just drives me crazy. While I love that panel of Goku succumbing to the blast, this whole thing just falls flat for me because it's a retread, and compared to what it's ripping off, it's just pathetic. Remember that episode of Star Trek where Kirk and Spock are trapped in a fight to the death, and the only way Dr. McCoy can figure out to save Captain Kirk is to drug him and feign the appearance of death? That was clever. Remember in the Red Ribbon Army arc when Goku seemingly dies and it turns out the only thing keeping him alive was the Dragon Ball he had kept in his dogi? That his grandfather had, in essence, saved him? That was also clever. Now remember in the Piccolo arc when Goku is seemingly killed by Piccolo to the point where his heart actually stops beating and he only manages to survive because... well, for no reason at all, really? And it wasn't even enough for Toriyama to just have Piccolo assume Goku was dead, he actually had to have him check for a heartbeat. So, was Goku only mostly dead and came back to life because the readers clapped their hands or something? Or is Piccolo just that big of an idiot? In all seriousness though, this arc does contain the last time that Muten Roshi has a leading role in Dragon Ball. While he does later come back to life, his character arc is fulfilled, and he largely spends the rest of the series relegated to the background, unfortunately, never managing to reach anywhere near the heights his students will. And yet he remains one of the more popular characters in the series, and I think that's largely because of how he was handled. While I glossed over it, his heroic sacrifice was written very strongly. More importantly, though, is his attitude. It's the fact that Toriyama allowed him to go out on his own terms, not once, but twice. His losses weren't embarrassing or pathetic. If anything, the fact that he lost made him seem more heroic and fearless. I don't care if I lose the championship, I'll jump out of the ring with a smile on my face. I don't care if I die, I'm going to confront Piccolo and manage to scare the ever-loving crap out of him before I do. And like all good mentor characters, he has to die so that characters like Ten Shinhan and Goku can prove that they've learned the lessons he's passed down, even if this is a world where death is cheaper than is often expected. Maybe the Muten Roshi shouldn't have actually pointed out where they buried the Dragon Balls, though. It would have been nice as his last act of defiance to force Piccolo to have to scrounge around in the dirt for them. But, oh well. Her role is primarily that of Gohan's mother, and she's mostly played for comedy. As we can see, she tends to overreact, she gets angry at Goku's inability to be a normal father, she's so narrowly focused that she simply cannot see the larger ramifications that would result from her family not getting involved in dangerous conflicts. She exists to be thwarted. And it makes sense. This is a series primarily targeted towards young people, particularly young boys. And I know that as a young boy, I found scenes of Gohan standing up to her to be extremely satisfying. Parents just don't understand, am I right? But I do think it goes too far when most of the fandom sees her as a controlling shrew and a terrible wife and mother. Due to her peripheral role, it's easy to miss seeing things from her perspective, but she does have a point. Remember that she's about to find out that her husband's been brutally killed and her 4-year-old son has been kidnapped by a demon who tried to take over the world, and she's not going to see them again for at least a year. That's horrific. That's terrifying. That's her whole world ending. It's played mostly for comedy because this is Dragon Ball and it doesn't dwell on the less pleasant implications. But every time Goku and Gohan go out to save the world, she's left at home, wondering if they'll ever come back. And sometimes they don't. Why do people hate her, though? In my opinion, it's because the TV series ruined Chi-Chi. Absolutely ruined her. There are too many tiny filler scenes to really go over them in DBD TV, but in general, when they need a quick bit of filler to pad for time, they'll just take a character and do a scene with them that plays on their foibles for a bit of cheap humor. In early parts of Dragon Ball, it's usually a scene with the Muten Roshi doing something perverted. After Chi-Chi gets reintegrated into the cast, it's often her getting angry or violent for little to no reason, bitching about Gohan not studying, and generally just being a total pain. Really though, Chi-Chi's not that bad in the manga. Yes, those traits are there, but they usually only manifest themselves when they're relevant and at much more tolerable intervals. But in the TV series, she is just insufferable. And since most fans, especially in this country, are more familiar with that adaptation, I can understand why she's detested. But that's not really her. So yeah, she was a tomboy when she was young, but she really only entered the tournament to bag herself a man. She fulfilled her fairy tale dream and she did what was expected of a young wife. She popped out a baby. And once she did that, she continued to do what was expected of her, especially given that this is a 30-year-old work from Japan, which was to focus entirely on being a mother. And so even though she knows nothing about it, she's gonna be the best damn mother you ever did see, and that means focusing on education. She doesn't know anything about education herself, but that's what you do when you're a mother. So of course her fighting and running around and blowing up dinosaurs falls to the wayside. As she sees it, that's not appropriate behavior for a wife and mother. And since Goku is clearly not the traditional breadwinner / provider that she was expecting, it probably causes her to cling to those ideals all the more. It's all she has left of that fantasy. And I'm certainly willing to bet Fry Pan Cosmo didn't prepare her for this. Or this. Or this. What is it about Piccolo? There's just something about him that makes him one of the most enduringly popular characters in all of Dragon Ball. As a hero, people love him because he presents a stern, unflappable exterior that can give way to a warm, gooey center if he's just shown a little love. Even when all the other characters are written as idiots, you can still usually count on Piccolo to retain his common sense. His clothes are cool, his powers are cool, he's just all around cool. As a villain, Piccolo makes things happen. He breaks Goku emotionally, he breaks him physically. He kills off hero after hero, he literally does take over the world. He destroys the Dragon Balls, he eats God! Piccolo is a game changer, so it should be no surprise that his debut story arc is also a game changer. The moment that horrifying image of Goku holding Kuririn's dead body appeared in Weekly Shonen Jump, Dragon Ball changed forever. The humor, adventure, and exploration of Dragon Ball's first couple of years were to be largely replaced with bloody, landscape-destroying battles with the fate of the world in the balance. Characters pushing their bodies to the limits, dire hopelessness until an as-of-yet unseen power-up manifests itself. It's funny that these elements, seen in retrospect as the future of Dragon Ball, were seen by at least some fans of the time as the end of Dragon Ball. This starts a series of events that will keep Goku largely separated from most of his friends, well, for the next 3 years, but for the entire arc as well. Now, how does that work out? In some ways, very well. In other ways, well, just try to follow me for a moment. In this story arc, Goku meets up with a minion of the main villain. This minion destroys Kinton, leading Goku to have to find alternate means of transportation for a while, but it's ultimately a temporary loss. Later on, an extremely powerful foe seeks out Goku in his attempt to collect the Dragon Balls. This foe is so powerful that he seemingly kills Goku and goes about his merry way. In the aftermath, however, Goku's new friend realizes that he is not, in fact, dead. Goku decides he must get stronger by climbing the Karting Tower. At the top, Karting offers Goku an elixir that will make him much more powerful. After getting his power boosted by Karting, Goku manages to defeat the enemy utterly. I'm sorry, but haven't we already seen this? Let's see, Goku leaves his friends, he loses Kinton, he's seemingly killed by a powerful new enemy, friend realizes he isn't, Goku gets power up from Karting Tower, defeats enemy, yes! This is the Red Ribbon Army arc! I mean, I am just amazed! Dragon Ball does get pretty formulaic in its later years, and this arc does start setting that formula in motion, but I don't think it's ever as specifically the same as it is here. Same hardship, same battle, same mentor. Unfortunately, in terms of what Goku is given to do, this feels more like the Great Demon Retread arc. So that's just insane.